Have you ever heard of a flood of molasses? It sounds like something out of a cartoon, a sticky, slow-moving joke. But on January 15th, 1919, in the north end of Boston, this bizarre disaster became a terrifying reality. It was a tragedy that was anything but funny, a day when a city street was turned into a deadly, sugary tsunami. This is the story of the Great Molasses Flood. Our story begins in a bustling, densely populated neighborhood, a hub for Italian-American and Irish-American families. Looming over them, at 529 Commercial Street, was a colossal steel tank. It stood 50 feet tall, 90 feet in diameter, and was owned by the Purity Distilling Company. Its purpose? To hold millions of gallons of molasses. Now, you might be thinking, why so much molasses? Well, this wasn't just for baking. During World War I, molasses was a key ingredient in producing industrial alcohol, which was then used to make munitions. The tank was a critical part of the war effort's supply chain. With the war over, the company was rushing to ferment the molasses into rum before prohibition laws kicked in. Time was money, and corners were about to be cut. The tank itself was a disaster waiting to happen. From the moment it was built in 1915, it leaked. It leaked so badly that local kids would bring cups to collect the sweet drippings. Residents complained about the groaning, rumbling noises it made. The company's response? They painted the tank brown to hide the leaks. Instead of fixing the structural flaws, they simply camouflaged them. The tank was hastily constructed, with steel plates that were too thin and rivets that were improperly spaced. It had never even been properly tested. It was a ticking time bomb, filled with over 2.3 million gallons of dense, viscous liquid. That winter of 1919 was strange. The day before the disaster, the temperature was a frigid 2 degrees Fahrenheit. But on January 15th, it shot up to an unseasonably warm 40 degrees. This rapid temperature change was the final straw. The cold molasses in the tank began to expand as it warmed, putting immense pressure on the already strained steel walls. Just after 12:30 p.m., as the city sat down for lunch, it happened. Witnesses reported hearing a sound like machine gun fire as the rivets popped off the tank, followed by a deep, thunderous roar. The giant tank ruptured, and a monstrous wave of molasses, estimated to be 25 feet high at its peak, burst forth. This wasn't a slow ooze. The wave moved at an astonishing 35 miles per hour. It smashed into everything in its path with unstoppable force. It lifted a freight train car clean off its tracks and hurled it against a girder of the elevated railway. The force was so great that it buckled the railway tracks, nearly causing a passing train to derail. Buildings were crushed, ripped from their foundations, and flattened as if they were made of cardboard. A firehouse was demolished, trapping firefighters inside. Horses from a nearby stable were caught in the sticky torrent, unable to escape. The human toll was devastating. The wave engulfed people on the street before they even had a chance to react. It was a thick, suffocating tide. Rescuers who rushed to the scene found a nightmare. The molasses was waist-deep in some areas, and its stickiness created a powerful suction, trapping victims like quicksand. The cold air quickly began to cool the molasses, making it even thicker and the rescue efforts even more difficult. Imagine trying to wade through a sea of thick, dark goo that pulls you down with every step. Rescuers, including 100 sailors from the nearby USS Nantucket, worked frantically for hours, and then days, navigating the treacherous, sticky landscape. They pulled survivors from the wreckage, many of whom were horribly injured and completely coated in the dark substance. It was almost impossible to tell who was who. The scene was one of chaos and despair. Doctors and nurses set up a makeshift triage station, struggling to treat the crushed bones and severe injuries. In the end, 21 people lost their lives, and over 150 were injured. The victims range from a 10-year-old boy who was collecting firewood to a blacksmith working in his shop. The cleanup was an epic undertaking. It took over 87,000 man-hours to chip, scrape, and wash the molasses away. For weeks, the city of Boston was coated in a sticky film. Firefighters used saltwater hoses to spray down the streets, washing the brown sludge into the harbor. For months, Boston Harbor ran brown. People tracked the molasses all over the city on their shoes, onto subway platforms, into their homes, and onto telephone mouthpieces. The sweet, sickly smell of molasses lingered over Boston for decades. Residents swore that on hot summer days, they could still smell it. In the aftermath, the question was, who was to blame? The company, United States Industrial Alcohol, tried to claim the disaster was an act of sabotage, suggesting anarchists had blown up the tank. This was a common fear at the time, but it didn't hold up. The residents of the North End, many of whom were working-class immigrants, banded together and filed one of the first class-action lawsuits in Massachusetts history. The legal battle lasted for years. For the first time, scientific expert testimony, including metallurgical analysis, was heavily used in a courtroom. The evidence was undeniable. The tank was poorly designed, shoddily constructed, and dangerously maintained. The company was found liable and forced to pay out settlements to the victims and their families, a sum equivalent to about $12 million today. The Great Molasses Flood was more than just a bizarre historical footnote. It led to lasting change. The disaster prompted Massachusetts and many other states to pass laws requiring that architects and engineers show their work, sign off on their plans, and be held responsible for public safety. It was a landmark case that helped establish modern corporate accountability and ushered in a new era of government regulation for construction projects. So, the next time you hear the phrase slower than molasses in January, remember the tragic day in Boston when molasses was anything but slow. It was a powerful, destructive force that took lives, destroyed a neighborhood, and forever changed the way our cities are built. It's a powerful reminder that cutting corners can have catastrophic and sometimes very, very sticky consequences. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as I did, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into forgotten history. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next video. See you next time.